Hello, welcome again. This is another one of Blanden's art talks that we engage with the artists showing here at the museum in one of the galleries, and we make this video and present it to you, and it'll be on YouTube. And if you're seeing it on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. That's kind of where we keep all of our videos that we produce for the museum. We'll also be having this will also be on our Facebook page too, but this is a way that we can kind of provide extra content about the exhibits going on and have a little bit of interaction with the artists. You know, this was really created during the COVID where we couldn't really have artist receptions, and we're slowly transitioning back into having those type of events, but still this is an extra element that we can add onto all our exhibits that we have going on here at the Blanden Art Museum. So if you haven't stopped by to see this amazing exhibit here in the East Gallery, please do. This is Inside the Tree by Iowa artist Roger Nass, who lives basically outside of Ames. And so we're welcome to have Roger here with us today, and we'll kind of just get into the conversation then, Roger. So thank you for joining us today.
Sounds good.
Yeah, good. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, well, I am now retired, have been retired since 2003, but before that I was educated as a chemist, and I worked for a specialty chemical company for 33 years, based in Chicago, in the Chicago area, but the job took me all over the world, and so I had an opportunity to spend a lot of time in some interesting places, including France, which if you ever go to Paris, they've got incredible museums there. You know, we all know about the Louvre, but they've got many, many world-class museums there. So I've had a chance to see the best.
Nice.
And but it really had nothing to do with what I'm doing now. Yeah. I was really in chemical research, but I was mostly in the management side of it. Okay. So that's really what I did.
Okay. So what brought you into this realm of creating these beautiful objects?
Well, when I retired, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do, but I have a couple of sisters that are nationally known painters, and they specialize in wildlife painting. And I've always been jealous of them because I'm sitting there doing this job, and basically, you know, a few years after I leave, there's not much sign that I was ever there. But when they do their work, there's always something being left behind, and there's always you know, a legacy of their work that's going to be available after they leave this planet. And so when I retired, I thought, well, I need something to do, and I'm looking for a hobby, and I decided that I would look into woodworking, thinking, okay, if I get into that, I could make some tables and whatnot, and maybe they would survive after I leave, and I would have something. So I got into that. I started doing woodworking. I set up a shop so I could do essentially any kind of furniture making, and I was making furniture, craftsman style. And one time I agreed to host a demonstration for our woodworking club in Ames, and the demonstration was turning pens. Okay. And so I got this exposure to that, and I thought, God, that looked kind of neat. And so I had a gift of an old lathe that was in my shop that one of my in-laws gave me. And so I had that, I set it up, and I started turning pens, and the next thing you know, I started turning more complicated things. I started getting more equipment that would allow me to turn what I wanted to, and I completely switched from the, as we call it, flat work, to turning. Okay. And that's basically what I've been doing ever since. So I've been at the turning part for probably 15 years. Okay. Something like that.
Now, was it? I think it was you who stated that, you know, for woodworking, once you go to turning, there's no turning back.
It's kind of we refer to that. Some of the guys in our club refer to it as going to the black side, because they know that when you do that you probably won't come back. Okay. And that does happen to a lot of people. They get fascinated with the turning, and I just have no interest in going back to doing the flat work. And And there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of the ones that I really like is that I get my own wood. I don't go and buy wood. I never buy wood ever, and so I harvest my own wood. I know where it came from. I know where the tree was. I know who the tree belonged to in many cases. And I also have a tremendous variety of trees. You know, living here in Iowa, you know, we are blessed with a place that really grows things well.
Yeah.
And it's not just corn and beans. You can grow just about anything, including a lot of trees. And so we do have a lot of trees that are not native to the area, but they do grow here and they grow well.
Okay.
And periodically, you get a chance to get a hold of some of those because they eventually come down.
Yeah.
And so that was another appealing part of it, is the variety, the tremendous variety, and the beauty of the trees themselves.
Well, do you think knowing where the wood actually comes from and having that strong connection to going out and gathering it versus going to like the lumber store or having it delivered like that, does that add an extra element or connection to the pieces that you're making?
Yeah, it does. As a matter of fact, it really has everything to do with it, because if you turn things like you see here in the gallery, you cannot go to a lumber yard and buy that wood. It's not available.
Yeah.
You have to go to special places to get it, and I don't do that. I harvest my own, so I know where it came from, and that's a big part of it, is to actually find that wood. And the other thing that to me was turned out to be very interesting is that when you make furniture, the wood that you use for furniture comes from the main log.
Okay.
So it's the main log of the tree that gets harvested, it gets milled into lumber, and that's what you use. The crown of the tree is never converted into lumber, never. And what I've discovered over the years is that where the really interesting part of the tree is in the crown.
Okay.
And so you get up in the crown, you get up into the, where you've got the limbs growing at odd angles and so on, and you get, as the tree grows, it produces extremely interesting grain patterns because of the stresses of growing there. And one of the more interesting areas would be in the crotches, where you get this figure. We refer to it, turning area, as feather.
Okay.
And so you find that, and you only find that there. So when you see furniture made with hardwoods, you'll never see that. The only chance you'd ever have of seeing that is if it was cut into veneer.
Okay.
And most people are not going to afford that kind of furniture anyway, so they're never going to see it.
Yeah.
So that's all I do. So it's all up in the crown of the tree. It's the variety of trees that we have here, and don't need anything more.
What would you say is your favorite wood type to turn?
I have several favorites from the standpoint of beauty. I would say it's black walnut.
Okay.
Black walnut is just an incredibly beautiful wood, and it has some incredible figure that you can capture. It's a nasty wood to turn. Black walnut is a very toxic wood. Anybody that has a black walnut tree knows that not much grows underneath them.
Yeah.
You can't use the chips for bedding for horses. It will actually cause them to get sick. So I have to be very careful when I'm turning it. I have to protect myself with full face mask, respiratory protection.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful wood. From the standpoint of other woods, I would also put box elder right up there. Box elder is an interesting tree because nobody would have a box elder tree in their front yard because it's an ugly tree. We used to always refer to it as a weed tree.
Yeah.
And but box elder has beautiful wood, and you can find beautiful grain. You can find flame, the red of the box elder. And so it's another favorite. Box elder wood is another type of maple, so it is a maple. And then as far as turnability, I would say Bradford Pear.
Okay.
And that's a decorative tree that a lot of people planted, but what they've discovered is after about 25 years, the tree falls apart.
Oh.
So once the tree gets mature and it's really a beautiful tree, it's a really nice tree, it starts just breaking, it just breaks. when the derecho came through, it destroyed many of the Bradford pears that were here in the central Iowa area.
Yeah.
But I'd say those three would be my favorites. There are many others that are also very pretty, but and nice to work with. But those would be the top three.
And I think looking around the gallery, I would agree the black walnut and the
Box elder.
box elder.
There's a number of pieces here of that.
And they are. The grain work is very interesting. And the black walnut that you have here, a lot of them leave the bark around the edges.
Yes, and that's leaving the bark on the edges is something that when I started turning, having traveled through and looked at a lot of museums, of course you see a lot of pottery. Mm-hmm. And this pottery exists in all shapes and forms. But one thing you never see is a piece of pottery that has a bark edge. You can't do that. They just can't do that. So when I started turning, and I'm turning shapes that mimicked pottery, I thought, well, why don't I just leave the bark on some of these pieces? Because the bark itself is also very interesting, especially on black walnut. Mm-hmm. Black walnut has one of the what I consider the most attractive barks, and it tends to stay on the wood. Okay. Some of them, it just falls off, so you really can't keep it up.
How difficult is it to turn with the bark on?
It requires good technique. It requires very sharp instruments because you can easily break it and knock it off. So and it also requires that you harvest the tree at the right time. So if the tree comes down in the winter, it's much more likely that the bark will stay on as opposed to the summer.
Why is that, do you think?
I think it's because the growth stops. The sap isn't running like it is in the summer, and so it kind of hardens. Okay. And so it tends to stay on better. Okay. One other comment about favorite trees. Any turner that I know covets finding burls. And actually, it's kind of ironic. I agreed to do this show back about 4 years ago. Yeah. And since that time, I found 2 incredible burls, and they are heavily highlighted in the show here at the gallery at the Blanden. Yeah. And they are essentially a once-in-a-lifetime find. And one of them was red elm or slippery elm, and the other one was a red oak. Okay. And so they're featured here, and they are just absolutely incredible. And to find those 2 and to find them and finish a bunch of pieces to get in here was fortunately good timing, actually. Well, we could blame the COVID for delaying things, but in fact, that actually enabled this to happen. It would have been quite a different show if we had done it 4 years ago. Yeah,
it would have. Yeah, for sure.
So, so burl, and if you see the burl, you'll see, the likes of wood you just don't get. Yeah. You just can't. You can't buy it. You can't buy furniture made out of it.
Talk about the burls a little. Like, what are for viewers, kind of describe what it kind of looks like.
Well, if you look at a tree and you see the tree, the normal growth, the normal log or the trunk or the limbs, and they have just a nice shape. Mm-hmm. If you see a big bump, like a big lump on it, there's a chance that that's a burl. Okay. Now it might just be a broken limb that's healed over, so it might not be burly at all, but it may be a burl. Okay. We don't know why they form. That's really not understood. It's not a common occurrence here in Iowa. There are some areas of the country where burls are much more common. Yeah. But here they occur, but not often. And so I've looked at many trees and not found. I've really only found 2 really spectacular burls in all the time that I've been hunting, and I know I'm looking for them. So, and I have access to about 100 acres of woods up in southern Minnesota, and I've got my cousins looking for them, my brother up there looking for them. So if they see them or whatever and they come down, we'll get them. Yeah. But you just don't.
So the burl is really about the texture that's contained within that.
In the burl, the growth of the tree is very different. The basic, the grain looks totally different. It's very erratic in a burl. Okay. And so it creates its own beauty. And of course, big burls are highly coveted. They're extremely valuable. They are typically cut into veneer, and that veneer then gets used to put on furniture or dashes of $1 million cars. So that's where you see it. Well, here what you have is no veneer. This is solid burl, so you can see what that looks like, and you can see the beauty of it. And and it's really more about the irregular patterns that form, the swirls and the buds that form. And then on top of that, these red elm burl pieces, we were able to actually pull the bark off on some of these pieces and expose the growth of the burl, and that shows how the buds grow. And we were able to do that because in the case of slippery elm, if it's a live tree, when it comes down, you can actually pull the bark off fairly easily, whereas normally you could never do that. You would have a hard time getting it off. So usually when you see turned burl pieces, they're just turned, and there's no natural edge there at all because it's turned away. So what you have in here, and I brought a number of pieces that are part of this show to illustrate that, because it's a rare thing. It's a rare thing to find a red elm tree that's living. They're almost all killed by the Dutch elm disease, so it's rare to find one. And the tree here that I found was actually in campus town of Iowa State University, and the tree was there before the university. It was an old tree. It survived. Somehow or other, the Dutch elm disease didn't get it, and urban renewal didn't get it. And so finally urban renewal did catch up to it, and they were tearing all of them down, and we were there and saw it. Otherwise it would have been gone. The tree service guys, they would have just ground it up and made chips, and it would have been nothing, it would have been gone. So that was a very, very fortunate thing to do. And so turners generally look and covet burls, and when they get them, a lot of times they're afraid to turn them because they don't want to screw them up because they're so rare to get. And so it's kind of funny because you've got it, you're afraid to do anything with it because you don't want to mess it up. But in this case, since this tree was so massive and there was so much burl on it, we were not hesitant. We went after it. And not just me, but our club did. So we got a lot of pieces out of there. So
when you go to harvest a burl, is there a way to cut it off the tree, out of the? I mean, is it off or out? I mean, well, in this case, the tree had to come down, and for us, in order for the owner to let us have it, we had to take the tree down. It was under power lines, so they couldn't get it out with a backhoe. So we had to cut it down. We had to agree to do that, and so we cut it down, and we cut pieces of it, and cut pieces, and you cut pieces off. Sometimes you just cut off the surface of the tree, kind of as the growth. You just cut the growth off. Sometimes the burl penetrates way into the tree. It might penetrate all the way to the center of the limb. And so in that case, you want all of it. And so we did, and we chased it. And some of the pieces in here you will see have areas that are burly and areas that are not burly. And that's because we were going in, we were chasing it, and that's how it evolved. That we defined that. Of course, where you have the spiky edges, that had to be at the cap of the burl. That had to be out at the outer bark edge of the tree. But this tree had wire in it. It had grown around fence posts, so we were hitting posts and wire, and it was not easy. It was a tough thing to cut up and to get at it, but it was worth every hour that we spent doing that. Well, for sure, just from the pieces that you have in here, it turned out to be gorgeous. So looking around, I do see similar forms and shapes that you use. Is there one particular kind of form that you love to produce over and over again? That's an interesting question, because when I'm being a chemist and being a heavy into mathematics and engineering, I'm a very kind of I don't consider myself an artist. Okay, so when I started doing this, my goal was to make things that were functional.
Well, of course, when you turn one of the functional things that you turn, the first thing I turned was a pen.
Yeah.
It's a functional thing, beautiful, functional.
Yeah.
And then I started turning bigger things, and I first started turning bowls. And again, thinking, okay, every bowl I turn could be used. It could be used for something. It would have a function.
Yeah.
And then I evolved into doing hollow forms. That is an enclosed piece and then I not only would enclose the piece, but I would cap it with a finial or some kind of a cap, and I would say, okay, this is a beautiful way to show the wood. It's a beautiful way to show the figure, but it's also functional because it's an urn.
Yeah.
So any of these pieces that are enclosed like that, the hollow forms, could be used as an urn. And so I actually put the finials, I thread them so you can take them on and off if you want. And so again, functional. So always in the back of my mind, functional, functional, functional. Platters, functional.
Yeah.
So from the so that's one aspect, is the functional aspect. And then, of course, form. I like to refer to kind of my guideline as what I'm doing is I follow the 3 F's. And the 3 F's for me are figure. I'm looking for figure. I want a pleasing form, and I want a perfect finish.
Okay.
And so it's figure, form, and finish. Now, figure, that's debatable. You know, what appeals to one person maybe doesn't appeal to another. As a matter of fact, I've actually seen people that don't care for burl, whereas, you know, we love it.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Yeah.
Figure is also very, very subjective. There are guidelines. You know, the Greeks came up with a number of guidelines for form. You know, if you want to see beautiful vases and, you know, functional, look at the Greek pottery.
Yeah,
and
sure.
You see incredible stuff. And so they had their ideas. They had very clear ideas about what constituted good form, but they were also functional.
Yeah.
Always functional.
Well, and they use a lot of math too in their forms too.
Yeah.
Or the shape.
Yes, right. And so you want a form that's pleasing. You know, that's not kind of getting at you or grating with you. And I've joked about this because, for example, if you do a vase, the wisdom, you know, the training that you might receive in this area would say that the largest diameter should be 2/3 up from the base. And so that's kind of a nice look. And I decided that, you know, another nice look is to put the widest diameter 1/3 up and then run it up from there. And so I jokingly refer to that as a paradigm shift from that 2/3 up, and I just say, well, you know, I think it's a nice shape. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I've seen a lot of that form, you know, in museums. You know, so to me, there's nothing wrong with it. It's hard to do. As a matter of fact, I've got a few pieces in here that are like that, and they are difficult and they're tricky to do, and so you have to figure that out too.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to have an idea of a form. It's another idea to execute it. You know, can you do it?
Yeah.
Can you make it?
Yeah.
Or can't you make it? And so I've actually done demonstrations or showed these to people, and they want to know how I hollow those long-necked forms with the large diameter in the bottom, and I tell them you can use drill a hole in there and you put carpenter ants in there if you're in the north, or you use termites if you're in the south. And I've actually had, I was just kidding, and I had people come up and ask for details on how to do that. I says, no, just kidding.
Yeah.
Well,
and you know, we've had a couple visitors come in and they've asked that similar questions, like, well, how does he get it so, how does he hollow it out in there? Yeah. And, you know, I usually tell them, it's like, well, I think you have special tools that you use.
Yeah, there are special tools that I use, and that go in there, and then on some of them, sometimes I go in from the bottom.
Okay.
And then if I go in from the bottom, I conceal it so you can't tell that I did.
Yeah.
And so that's all part of the trick and the magic. Yeah. So it's all kind of about how do you do this, and And you might say, well, if you just do the form and you've got a vase, for example, with a large bottom, why do you hollow it out? Why don't you just leave it? Who cares? You know, and in here people wouldn't really know that these are hollow, but they are. Yeah. And they basically have to be. And the reason they have to be is not because of the weight, not particularly because of the use, because chances are it's just going to be looked at. Yeah. But they have to be hollowed because if you don't, the wood is more likely to crack. Mm-hmm. And so if you want it to stay together, you've got to take that wood out and allow it to move. Yeah. And move without cracking. And then you can go from there. So hollowing is a important thing, and it's an important thing even on the, you know, like there are some big hollow forms in here that, you know, like that big sphere. That was a challenge. I had talked to people and asked about how to make a sphere, and they knew how to make a solid wood sphere, but they had to make them small, otherwise they cracked, they break. And so I said, well, I want to make a big sphere. How do I do that? And so the solution was turn the sphere and then hollow it out, and then let it dry, and then return it to true it back up to a spherical shape. And if you don't do that, odds are it'll just be all cracked and kind of ruined. And I personally, I accept cracks sometimes, and some pieces I usually don't like it. I like to, I like though my guideline and my instruction to people that are turning or learning to turn is that when the piece is finished, when you look at it, if you see something on that piece that you did, you know, like tear out is one of the common problems in turning. If you did that, it's bad. Yeah. It's not acceptable. You got to get rid of that. If the tree grew that way, if that void was there because the tree grew it, that's okay. And there's some pieces in here that illustrate that. That there could be a bark inclusion, there could be some kind of a deformity or whatever. Yeah. But if the tree did it, it's acceptable. If I did, it's not. Okay. And so if those cracks weren't in there when I turned the piece, and then they showed up later, I'm ready to throw it in the trash, unless it's a beautiful piece of wood, and then I might save it. Okay. So that's a decision that you make as you're making it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's see here. What else can we? You know, we've talked about quite a bit, Roger. What would you say? You know, I think you've talked a little bit about this, but we can kind of maybe go into a little bit more. How's the wood turning changed for you over the last, let's say, five years?
I'd say in the last 5 years, when I learned how to turn, the first thing that I wanted to do was to get technically proficient. In wood turning, you know, if you're learning how to do furniture, learning to use a table saw and a planer and a joiner, you know, you can be taught to do that in a very short period of time. I mean, literally half hour, you know, on any of those pieces of equipment. Learning to turn takes a lot longer. There's a lot more involved. There's a lot more technique. It's many times scary, you know, because you are spinning something and sticking a sharp gouge into it, you know, and bad things can happen. And there are occasionally people get killed doing this. So you have to be serious about that. So first of all, I wanted to accomplish and get my techniques down so that I knew I could turn whatever I wanted. Okay. And so the first years that I turned, it was really about that. It was really about just getting technique down. Now the last 5 years, it's really about finding wood and really finding what I think is going to be really good. So if I see a tree service guy taking down a tree or trimming a tree, and I go over and I see what kind of tree it is, and if I'm interested in the wood, I'll say, you know, hey, I would be interested in some of this, and of course they're more than willing to load it up for you. They'll give you all the wood they want because they just have to a lot of times pay to get rid of it. Yeah. And so they will do it, and then I'll tell them where I want it cut because if you just let them cut it, they'll mess it up. So, like for crotches, you know, they'll cut too close to the crotch and it'll be ruined. So I know now where to look. I know where to find the good things. And so now it's really a matter of more seeking out really beautiful wood. And the shapes, the forms, they tend to be pretty similar. Some turners do production turning, and they're perfectly happy to turn 24 spindles that have to be exactly alike. I don't want to ever turn anything exactly alike. And so if somebody comes to me and even if they want 3 table legs or 4 table legs, I'd say, well, I'll give you a name of another guy. I'm not going to do it. Because I don't want to do 3 of anything or 4 of anything or 20 of anything. And so I want everything to just be, okay, this is what the wood is going to let me do. Sometimes the form, I'll be chasing defects in the wood. I might turn out the defects and go to another form. So I don't know that until I get into the wood, because you really can't tell until you get in there. Some things I know what to expect in there, but there are always surprises. And so I'd say from a form standpoint, not really changing much. It's really more now about finding beautiful shapes. And I've thought to myself, it's kind of ironic. I didn't start this hobby until I was retired. And actually, if you look in here, in this particular gallery showing, most of the really nice pieces I've turned in my mid-70s. And who would think you could do that? Who would think you could do anything?
Well, there's been plenty of evidence in art history of great artists producing works in their later years. Cézanne was quite old when he was producing his. Well,
Michelangelo.
Yeah. Well, and there's plenty to choose from.
Yeah, it can happen. However, I guess probably being educated in the sciences, it's interesting. In the sciences, that doesn't happen. Most all of the great scientific breakthroughs were done by guys in their very young age. I mean, just shockingly young sometimes is when those great discoveries were made. And so I'm kind of more used to that, and that that by the time you're 40, you're pretty much washed up. And so you become a teacher instead of an inventor. But here, I think it was really a matter of it took a while to get technique down, so I could do what I wanted to do, and then it took. A lot of guys, one of the questions they have is, well, how do I cut the tree? Okay, here's a tree, it's down, the derecho knocked it over, it's laying there, where do I go? Where do I go with a chainsaw? Where do I go? Where do I cut, and how do I cut it? And what do I expect to find? And so it's really a matter of knowing that and being able to do it, because I basically do all my own chainsawing, I do all my own bandsawing. And in turning, I don't go anywhere to have anyone else do any of that. So it means that you need to be able to run those saws, otherwise you'd be kind of stuck. You couldn't prepare the pieces that you were going to work on if you couldn't do that. So, certain amount of health and I guess knowledge about what you're looking for is all part of that, and it's all critical part, and it's just worked out pretty well.
Good. And who would have thought there was so many, so much on the backside that people either don't realize or see. You go out talking about chainsawing the tree down and getting the pieces just right, and then putting them on the bandsaw, and then you have to allow those pieces to dry and all that.
Yeah, the lapse time on that's another thing is patience. And in our club we have a lot of older guys, a lot of retired people that are into turning, and the process, I turn probably 95% or more of my turning is wet wood. It's fresh cut, tree come down, and so I rough it out into the approximate shape that I want, and then I let it dry. And on big pieces, it's not uncommon for me to let them dry 4 or 5 years. Well, a lot of the guys don't want to wait 4 or 5 years, so they're kind of caught in this area. Some of these guys don't even want to buy green bananas because they don't know if they'll ripen before while they're around. So I'm sitting there and telling them, well, look, you got, greenwood turning is a lot of fun. It's the only way to do big pieces, the only way.
Yeah.
And so now you can speed up the drying. You can put them into ovens and kiln dry them. You can put them in the microwave and speed it up. You can do other things that I've explored, but I have no interest in that. I want it naturally dried. I take the time, and I just figure some of the pieces that I've roughed out this year, I may never finish. And someone else might have to finish them, and that's okay. I don't care.
Yeah.
Let someone else finish them. My mentor, actually, he died, and we took all of his rough turn pieces and we spread them out across the club and finished them. So it was kind of a neat thing because we had a club meeting where we brought about 45 pieces that he had roughed out and we'd finished. The whole club. And we showed all of those with the guy's wife was there, invited to the meeting. And
kind of a good way to have closure.
Yeah, it was a pretty neat thing. It was a pretty neat thing because he was very influential in the formation of our chapter of wood turners in the Ames area, and so that worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
And he was a big influence to help me learn because again, when you pick up a hobby in your retirement years, you can't spend 30 years figuring out how to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to accelerate the process. You can't just learn through hard knocks. You gotta learn through other people's hard knocks, and you got to get yourself up to speed quicker. And in something like turning, that takes some time.
Yeah.
So can't waste it.
Yeah, don't waste time.
Don't
Get
waste
in there
it.
and get to work, right?
Yep, that's right.
Let's see. What is the best piece of advice that you've been given?
I think for me, since my whole reason for doing this was to make things that might be around after I'm gone, to do that, I didn't want to be a production turner. I wanted to make really nice things that people would want to keep, not just throw away when, get it and throw it away, or ends up in a garage sale or something.
Yeah.
So the guy that was my mentor, one of the things that he said is that remember that this is a hobby, and don't be making things that will sell. Don't have that as a driver. Because when I talk to production turners, that's what happens to them. They make the same thing over and over and over again, and the thing they make is what they can sell. And so they know what they can sell, and that's what they make.
Yeah.
And so I don't do that. So if you look at what I do a lot of different things. Now, it doesn't mean that people wouldn't buy them, and they would, but I don't care about selling them. So, so that's not a driving force for me. But so I would say that what it allowed me to do is to just enjoy the whole process of turning, and not turn it into I got to make money. I got to justify buying these tools. I got to make this, and I got to go and sit and at some craft show or art show and try to sell these things. And I didn't want to ever do that. I didn't. I figured let someone else worry about that.
Yeah.
I let my kids worry about what to do with these things. So I don't want to worry about it. I don't want to be bothered by it, and I don't want it to influence what I do.
Yeah.
And so if I take a lot of time to make something, that's okay, because knowing that if I did spend a lot of time to make something and tried to sell it, I probably wouldn't make much money as far as your, if you were looking at an hourly, what's your return?
Yeah.
And so I think that by keeping it that way, it kept turning interesting to me. It was not tedious to do it. It was always, go out and see what I can discover. And of course, since I turn things green, when I turn it green, I can see, well, this is going to be a really pretty piece. I hope it survives.
Yeah.
And then I put it away for 2-3 years and pull it back out. Well, I forgot. So when I return it, I'm thinking, man, that was a really beautiful piece of wood, and look at it's coming out, and it survived. And so I get the pleasure twice.
Yeah.
I say, when I first found it, and then when I finished it. And so it doesn't bother me that I don't have to turn it and finish it right away and all that. That's not a problem at all.
Well, good. Well, lastly here, what does it mean for you to be able to exhibit here at the Blanden Art Museum?
Well, that's an interesting question because as you know, I mean, I wouldn't have come here and tried to push for this. I mean, it was it was Doug and his daughter that really were the ones that thought that this should be done, and and quite frankly, I wasn't even familiar. I really wasn't familiar with Fort Dodge at all. But the only thing I knew about Fort Dodge was they host the cross-country meet for the high school runners. That's all I knew about Fort Dodge, nothing else. And so when I came here and talked about this, I wasn't real excited about it. I think Doug and his daughter were more excited than I was, and so we were looking at that, and so, if I was interested in selling, the obvious thing would be, well, here, this is a way to get your, show your things and let people see them, and have them look at it, and maybe people want to buy some things and whatever. But that wasn't a motivation at all, not at all. Mm-hmm. So when I go back and I think about this, and I go back 4 years, one of the things that it did is it made me think about why I do what I do. Okay?
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought about that. I was just doing it.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, and I didn't know this question would ever be asked.
Yeah.
Because I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, and I actually started when I would work on a piece or finish a piece, I would look at it and I'd say, that piece could go into the Blanden, or this piece won't. This piece ain't going anywhere. This piece is going in a box.
Yeah.
And so I started judging my work, and I was judging it on the basis of is this museum quality or not. So that's one thing that happened. And so when I found those burls, I started making a lot of pieces that I said any of these pieces could go into the Blanden. They could go anywhere.
Yeah.
And so I really started doing that. And I'd sit there and I'd be finishing, 10, 15 pieces in my finishing process, and I'd be looking at them. I'd say, well, I got 3 here that could go. The other 7, no, they ain't going, ever. And so it made me think about that.
Okay.
And in the process of thinking about that, then I started thinking more about, well, why is this a museum quality piece? Why? Mm-hmm. Well, maybe it's got a beautiful figure.
Yeah.
Maybe it's got a really nice form. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a really unusual piece of wood.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking more about that.
Okay.
And probably really affected me, kind of in a way spoiled me in terms of what I would do. Because now I have a problem.
Yeah.
If I have kind of a bland piece of wood, nothing particularly interesting about the figure, nothing particularly interesting about the form.
Yeah.
Why am I doing it?
Yeah.
Why? And so I think some of these pieces I'm having trouble wanting to even finish them. I'm actually maybe want to shove them off to the side and let someone else finish them, which is an interesting thing. So these things all influenced me, in ways that I wouldn't have anticipated.
Yeah.
Just to think about what you are doing and why are you doing it. And this whole thing about inside the tree, the reason, and this was, I wasn't thinking about that before I agreed to do this.
Yeah.
That inside the tree, that came about after. And what that was about, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to make that display of spheres, because I knew I couldn't bring pieces of every tree that I've turned.
Yeah.
There's no way. And so it got me thinking that, people see trees, everybody sees trees, very few people can identify trees, excepting maybe some of the real classic ones. Mm-hmm. It's about all they can identify.
Yeah.
They have no idea what the wood looks like, even if they buy expensive hardwood furniture. Mm-hmm. And why don't they know? Because every furniture maker stains his wood.
Yep.
They're all stained. So you think you know what light oak looks like, or red oak or white oak, that's not what it looks like in the tree. Mm-hmm. And so that was another thing. So I thought about this, and I thought, well, that again affects how I finish. I want the wood to look like it did when I was cutting the tree green. Mm-hmm. Not what it looked like after the tree had been down for, for 5 years,
Yeah.
but what it looked like when it was fresh cut. So my finish is all below the surface. I don't want anything built up on the surface. I don't want, heavy layers of polyurethane or whatever. I want it, surface of the wood is what you see.
Yeah.
And I want the wood to look as close as it did when I first turned it. And so that also influenced what I'm doing and how I'm finishing
Yeah.
and what I'm doing. And so it's really kind of a thing like, okay, you got all these trees. Here's an opportunity to look at what they actually look like, what the wood looks like.
Yeah.
And again, nobody builds furniture out of the crown of the tree, but that's where all the interesting grain is.
Yeah.
That's where all the figure is.
Right.
And you're not seeing that. You never see that. You might see a little log cut up for firewood, and that's the closest you'll get. You won't never see what that looks like,
Yeah.
what that wood looks like. So that's a big part of it. And that actually all that thinking really happened after the commitment to come here.
Oh, good.
Basically, it was helpful to kind of know, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Why am I doing it? Why do I continue to do it? Why do I keep going out and doing more of it?
Yeah.
Because it is a problem. My kids' houses are filled with my turnings. Our house is filled with them. I'm boxing stuff up. But I still want every piece to be a beautiful piece.
Yeah.
I don't want to turn a crummy piece.
Yeah.
So I won't sign it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we turned you into an artist. That's what.
Yeah,
we did.
that's kind of what you've done, and I don't. If you see my sister's works, to me that's another level of artistry. But this is a thing. This is wood art, and also in the turning world, of course, there's a lot of turners. They do a lot of things, and a lot of them paint their pieces. And I refuse to do that. The only painted pieces in here, or colored pieces, are those hats.
Yeah.
And that was just kind of a lark to do that. That's not what I normally do.
Yeah.
And so, to me, if you're going to paint it, then I say, well, why are you using wood? Why don't you just use pottery and porcelain? You can make all these shapes and just paint them. Why are you doing that? Why are you covering this beautiful figure? Why are you doing it? And then some people, they like to carve them and they do all kinds of other things. I'm not really into that, but that's okay. And that's the turning world has really developed more and more into the artsy side of things. And as a matter of fact, I've even had people tell me that if you're a turner, you're not a woodworker, you're a wood artist.
Oh, really?
I've had people say that, and they consider you a different person.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, that's actually I've seen that, I've heard it, and then they'll stop calling. I still call where my lathes are. I call it my shop.
Yeah.
But for them, it becomes a studio.
Studio.
Yeah. So they go out to their studio and they turn wood.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things they do. So it is something. I think you'll see more and more of it.
Yeah.
That this will happen. And to me, like for example, the derecho last year, it devastated the Iowa Arboretum. So anybody that knows the Iowa Arboretum knows that they lost over 200 mature trees. And they aren't getting those back.
Yeah.
That's not, you can't, you can raise all kinds of money, but you're not going to replace those trees. That's going to take years and years and years.
Yeah.
And some of them you'll never get.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we did as a club, we took a lot of the Arboretum wood that was destroyed in the derecho, and we're turning pieces right now, and we're donating them a lot of those back, and they will auction those off and raise money for the Arboretum.
Yeah.
Now, it was nice for us because it gave us a chance to turn some really weird wood that they had planted out there that you normally would never get your hands on.
Yeah,
and so we got some interesting stuff that's going to come out of that. Unfortunately, most of that was before this. That's just now being drying out.
Yeah.
So from the derecho last year.
Well, Roger, again, thank you for coming in today. It's been a fantastic experience, not only the exhibit, but also just, the multiple times that I've got the opportunity to talk with you and talk to you about, the wood turning, art as well.
It's a little different for you too, isn't it?
It's a little bit different, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's not something you normally do, but.
No, but I like, and that's one thing that I enjoy doing is bringing in works like this that are kind of outside of what the norm is, and then have people, be exposed to it and experience it, because I think they're gorgeous things, and I think, the more the better. So if you haven't had a chance to stop by the Blanden to check out Roger's show, it'll be up until November 13th. Here in the East Gallery at the Blanden Art Museum. We're located at 920 3rd Avenue South here in Fort Dodge, Iowa. And well, thank you for spending the time with us here watching this video. And please subscribe and check us out at blanden.org or friend us at our Facebook page. So thank you again, and thank you, Roger.
Okay.